Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for hanging in with us on this long day. We have one more presentation, and then my colleague and I will give a few closing remarks. I'm Paula Hanley from the Partnership for College Completion, and my colleague Joe Saucedo is with me here today, and we'll give a few closing remarks at the end of this presentation from our colleagues from Olive-Harvey College, LaTia Lane and Jovan Rivera-Lovato, who are going to do a presentation on out-of-house and home food and housing equity as community care. And without further ado, I will turn it over to them. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Paula. As Paula mentioned, I am LaTia Lane, she, her pronouns. I am the clinical director of the Wellness Center at Olive-Harvey College, and I'll pass it to Jovan to introduce themselves.
Thank you. My name is Jovan. I use they and them pronouns, and I am the clinical case manager in the Wellness Center at Olive-Harvey College. And as Paula mentioned, we're going to be talking a little bit about food and housing equity as community care.
So we're going to start by talking a little bit about Olive-Harvey, who we are, who we serve. Obviously, we're located in the city of Chicago, so we want to just share a little data about what is happening in the city of Chicago. So a most recent report in 2023 by the city of Chicago said that approximately 6,139 persons are experiencing homelessness in Chicago on a given day. So imagine how that is looking inside of our school systems as well, our colleges. And there's a massive shortage in the affordable housing that exists inside the city of Chicago. So there are some in our suburbs, there are some in the surrounding Chicago area, but if we're thinking about like access inside the city of Chicago, there's a major shortage. And so with Olive-Harvey, we're located on the southeast side of Chicago, in the Pullman area, very close to Roseland as well. We're also a PBI. I had the pleasure of attending Chicago State's session earlier, and they talked about them being the only 4-year PBI, and they are our neighbors. So we send a lot of students there. So as a community college, we are PBI, and about 21.7% of our students are identified under Hispanic or Latinx, and 36% of our students are first generation, and approximately 70% are Pell eligible. So what we want to show is that our students are reflective of the neighborhoods that we're servicing. So 24% of the neighborhood is living below the poverty line, and about 90% of high school students are coming from those low-income families. So you can imagine there is a great need for basic needs support. And this is where our Wellness Center comes in. So a few years ago, I want to say it was from 2018, so prior to the pandemic. So think about these numbers and think about how they may have shifted now that, I don't want to say post-pandemic, but let's just say post-2020. So about 53% of our students there reported low or very low food security. And I think the Hope Center is actually doing a survey right now on our students. So maybe next year we can present some updated data regarding food and housing security amongst our students. So what we're seeing in the Wellness Center, a report from us, is the highest basic need that's reported to us is housing insecurity. And so I think most of you folks know about Chicago and it being segregated. So with us being on the southeast side, we're probably one of the most under-resourced areas in town. And so even access to equitable resources is a challenge that we're dealing with at Olive-Harvey. So I would talk about some of the things that we're doing to manage all of this info and data that I just shared. So a few of our efforts, and I'll say that this is not an exhaustive list of what we're doing. But out of our equity plan grew this food and housing security subcommittee. And one of the things that we noticed, which I think everyone has echoed earlier when it comes to basic needs support, is if someone is having housing security, they're more than likely also having foods. I'm sorry, if they're having housing insecurity, they're likely having food insecurity. So we put those together because those are closely connected. And so in this committee, we grew a lot of things. One of the things that we grew was our Panther Pantry. And I did put some data about who we're serving. Jovan will talk about the culture and the community that we created around our pantry. But these are some of the numbers. So last fiscal year, we were a little under 3,000. These numbers are up to date as the end of March. So we've serviced more people up through the end of March in our Panther Pantry. And this extends to our satellite campus that we have at Olive-Harvey as well. So we are extending our services to the credit students, but also our adult education and continuing education students as well. Another thing that we do is our emergency funds, which I heard a lot of the presenters talking about today, to meet those basic needs concerns, specifically around like rent and utilities, because that is a part of housing. We also offer different things inside our wellness center that are not advertised. I'm trying to figure out how to word it, like not advertised through the food pantry, but we do have emergency food for immediate consumption because the food pantry more than likely has groceries. But what do we have in this picture is this fresh food that we serve as well that's available to students. We also have personal hygiene products. Again, if we're thinking about housing security and food insecurity, all of these things are needed. And then another thing, we also support with grocery store gift cards. So along with access to the Panther Pantry, we also provide them with gift cards to go grocery shopping in their community, which I think Dr. Sarah was talking about earlier today too. And then we have community partners that help provide resources and support. So this connection to community, again, which we'll talk about later, to create this culture of community care. And last year, I had the pleasure of hiring Jovan to join our wellness center. And part of this was the presentation. I think with Chicago State, they talked about that a lot, is that what we're seeing is the greatest need is case management support. So initially, our wellness center was just staffed by mental health clinicians. And when you think about a wellness center, that's most on college campuses, that's what we're thinking about, mental health counseling. And what I was noticing is that there was a barrier to providing those basic needs supports. And we needed someone in-house who could provide that case management support. And so I advocated to administration to provide us with a case management position that will be full-time and to be housed inside of our wellness center. And I think this is pretty new for a lot of wellness or counseling centers to have that. Either they're housed outside, or they don't have a lot of communication, or they don't have it at all. And so I'm gonna pass the mic to Jovan to talk a little bit about the work that they do as it relates to supporting students inside of our wellness center.
Thanks, Tia. Yeah, so again, my name is Jovan. I'm the clinical case manager in the Wellness Center at Olive-Harvey. So as Tia had mentioned, right, there was a lot of sort of thought and work that went into formulating this position before I was hired, right? There was services being provided with regard to mental health in the office, but students needed basic needs, resources, and support as well. And part of the reason why this position was created is because those mental health clinicians could not do both, right? You can't spend the majority of your time supporting students' social emotional well-being and then also spend an additional 40 hours, right, supporting their basic needs. And so the way that Tia and our wellness center has approached addressing that need is by bringing on a full-time person who can do that. So we'll talk a little bit more about how that sort of balances the weight in terms of who's doing what type of work and help prevent burnout and things like that. But part of what being a case manager is about really primarily is about identifying resources that are available for folks, in this case for our students, right? And then making that information accessible to students, and then further supporting them in accessing those resources. So I have on here an example of one of the ways that we have tried to do that. With these flyers that you see in the lower right-hand corner, there's two flyers. In the front you have, and they're both with regard to housing resources. In the front you have kind of a stylized flyer, right? It's got some different colors on there, different fonts. You've got QR codes. It's sort of structured in two columns with these little dividers in between. Some bolded words, some non-bolded words, right? It's very sort of engaging visually. And for a lot of students, this is really helpful because if you are looking at a plain piece of paper, right, or something like a brochure, they might not necessarily be interested in that, but this is something that is visually appealing enough that students can look at it without necessarily being turned away right away. QR codes is really important because most folks have access to a mobile device and they know, especially young folks, right, know how to use the QR code, how to navigate technology in that way. And so this makes it easier for them to access resources right then and there when it's on the front of their mind and they're thinking about it. We also have a lot of students on campus who are disabled or neurodivergent. And so it's important for us to provide this sort of visually and technology stimulating sort of resource, but also one that is very sort of cut and dry and straightforward. And so sort of hidden or tucked behind that first flyer, you have a second flyer. And this is one that is actually provided by All Chicago, which is another agency that's Chicago-wide, citywide. And we've just kind of taken it on and made it available for students because it doesn't have the different colors. It doesn't have the two columns. They're simply providing the information in a plain and accessible text for students. And so in this way, right, we take the housing equity element a little bit further, right, in making sure that the information is accessible in multiple different ways so that every student can actually take advantage of that information if and when they need to. So the other part of my job, right, is the accompaniment. I'm here to support students as they navigate these different resources. That means meeting with students to determine what is actually applicable for their situation, what feels appropriate and comfortable for them. How do they get to these different resources? Can they get there online or in person? Part of my job is knowing which one is faster, right? And which one is going to be a better fit for that particular student, depending on their transportation needs. And if they need a bus card, we provide bus cards as well. Making referrals to the Chicago Transportation Authority, different programs so that they can get to a place where they can get on a housing wait list and things like that. So sort of supporting students at every level, right? Getting the information to them, getting it to them in an accessible way, and then accompanying them as they navigate those resources and supporting them through the whole process.
Yeah, and I'll even add to the accompaniment part. One of my favorite sayings is people don't know what they don't know. And with Jovan, we're able to increase that access to allow students to know that this is a resource for them. And with Jovan, they can, this accompanying piece, right, walk with them through the process. So there are times where we sit on the phone with providers as students ask questions or figure out how to ask questions. And as a clinical case manager, Jovan can coach them through this is what we're looking for, this is what you're looking for, helping them formulate some of the words, phrases, statements that they don't quite know that they don't know yet until they get on the phone with the provider. And so we can advocate, and I think that's a piece of that equity lens that we're talking about as well. Like we can advocate with the students while they're having these conversations. And that is an important part about having that clinical skills, the clinical case manager, so that they can provide that support with students because it can be lengthy, right? And if we're thinking about the 40 hours, as Jovan mentioned, throughout the week, Jovan could be with the client for 2.5 hours just on hold waiting to talk to a provider. So it's important to have that person within the wellness center to be able to spend that time to support those students.
Definitely. So now that we've given you all a little bit of context, right, as far as what's going on at Olive-Harvey, right, what our community looks like, and then shared with you a little bit of the efforts that we're sort of engaged in the last couple of years and currently, we want to sort of dive into the nitty-gritty part of the presentation today for us, which is really about the community care bit, right? And connecting this equity and basic needs to mental health support, right? Because what we found both through our work on campus, but also in the research is that those two things are very, very closely linked. They're directly or have a direct sort of relationship with one another. And so we sort of are developing a framework for thinking about, but also engaging students in supporting their basic needs that is sort of also very mindful and aware and supportive of their mental health. So we're all here at this conference. So we have a sort of baseline understanding of what equity is, right? So just a sort of quick definition, like I was talking about earlier, identifying and addressing the unique challenges and desires that individuals and communities face to ensure their overall success. So as Tia talked about in the first slide, the city of Chicago has its own sort of statistics as far as what housing and food insecurity looks like. But Chicago is also an infamously segregated city, right? And so what we have here on the far south east side, right, is a community that has been sort of historically not invested in. And so there are programs and services and things like that to support people in navigating housing and food resources generally in the city, but not all of those resources are available to our students in this community. And many of them are actually on the opposite side of the city, right, on the north side of the city and the far north side, which for folks who are familiar with Chicago, is actually pretty far and can sometimes be really difficult to get to. And those resources are not always available remotely, right? And so we have a community that's sort of experiencing a unique sort of level of disinvestment and you could say exploitation, resulting in sort of a higher level of need, like LaTia had said earlier. And so we come into our work with that in mind, knowing that we're sort of navigating not just a sort of sparse network of resources, but that we have unique community and individual needs here at Olive-Harvey, right? So we take equity, or we sort of bring that into a framework of community care by thinking about the efforts that we're taking to build and maintain the health and wellness of our community as a whole, not just as individual students, right? So part of that is recognizing what our responsibility is as members of our community. And as clinicians, clinical counselors, clinical directors, clinical case managers, right? That's about meeting students where they're at, right? Doing the sort of frontline work, which is the pantry work, which is the accompaniment work and stuff like that, but also recognizing that there are programs on the south and the north side that are doing work on the policy level, that are doing work at the state level, right? And that those are the folks that we need to be partnering with so that we can provide and advocate for change on sort of all of those levels, right? But our primary responsibility is to meet with students face-to-face on a daily basis. And so our work is sort of manyfold in that regard. So part of that also is doing some normalizing work, right? Making sure that folks know that the sort of lack of basic needs support or the need for support is pretty normal. It's pretty average in our community. It's something that many of us are really struggling with. So with regard to the pantry, for example, we've done a lot of work to normalize going to the pantry, to reduce the stigma so that students know that actually the pantry is pretty common here on campus, right? It's pretty popular. A lot of people go to the pantry. And not just students, but also faculty and staff. And so if you need to go to the pantry to get some groceries, that's all right. We understand. And other folks on campus understand as well. And we're going to support you in doing that. That's why the pantry is here. right? And we do that with all of the sort of resources that we provide. And so with that, then we can see that we're sort of addressing some of the anxiety, right, that comes along with asking for help. And that is really important in that accompaniment process. We also encourage students to advocate for themselves and for each other for things that they feel is necessary to have, right? And so part of what students have done is they've let us know that they're struggling with food, that they're struggling with housing, that they need some emergency funding, right? That they need these different resources. And that's part of why we have them available on campus now, but we want to continue to sort of integrate that student voice and to encourage student activism so that we can have supports that are sort of responsive to their unique needs. So part of that quickly is that we are bringing in more and more students onto that housing and food insecurity committee so that they can have a sort of active role in shaping the efforts that we are currently sort of active or that are active on campus so that they are sort of responsive to students' needs. So
Yeah,
yes.
and Jovan, I want to add about the community care part too as well. With our students is it allows them to be an active participant and receiving resources, advocating for more resources, advocating for other students to have resources, right? So I think a lot of times when we're talking about like equity work, we're talking about it from a higher level thinking, or just including mostly administrators and not a lot of students. So with this model, our goal is to have students to be active participants in this work. And we'll see, which I'm sure Jovan will talk about, we'll see students like walking other students to the wellness center, walking other students to the pantry, helping them shop without our staff being the ones to facilitate that exchange. It's become a part of that normalized behavior where we're encouraging the student-student peer-to-peer support without us having to, I guess, overpower them or stand in a way where we're connecting. We're utilizing staff to connect each other, like to connect students. We're creating that community of care where student voice is prioritized.
I'm really glad you brought that up because I think that's a good example. Because there's a couple of different layers there, right? On one hand, we're sort of hoping to support and empower students to take up that role, right, of caring for their peers, of knowing what is available to them, and not only taking advantage of it themselves, but also sharing that information with their classmates and with their friends and with their siblings who might be here on campus as well. And then, like Tia said, bringing them over to the pantry, which 99% of the time is staffed by other students, right? So then again, we're sort of preventing or providing a buffer for that sense of power difference and potential judgment or stigma because there's a quote unquote professional, right, in the pantry when they go. But then the other layer to that is that students are much more likely to take advantage of programs and resources and things like that if they see that their peers are doing it and if they have that sort of buy-in because their friend is also going to the pantry or their friend has also come into the wellness center, or also asked for help or is asking for help at the same time that they are, right? It makes it a lot easier to engage in that process. And so by having students on the committee as well as students working in the pantry, students who sometimes just spend time socializing in the wellness center, right, really helps to sort of address and sort of nurture that sense of community, that sense of belonging, as well as make those resources and the supports sort of more accessible for everybody, right? I think that's actually the last thing that I wanted to say. So Tia, I will pass it back to you to talk a little bit more about the impacts and what we've seen as a result of our efforts to create this sense of community and a framework for community care.
Yeah, absolutely. And so part of this impact, right, is looking at even the impact within our center. So adding Jovan, who primarily focuses on the case management care, what we see is as clinicians, so I don't know if there are mental health folks on the the call or this session, but one of the things that we notice is in counseling, in that social emotional support, we also see the need for that basic need support. And it's hard sometimes to hand off to a community agency for that support, basic need support, while still also doing the counseling support for them, because there's a lot of gaps. And so what we're able to do even within our wellness center is establish this community of care, because we meet as a team, we work as a team. So I may be counseling someone, but Jovan is the one who is providing that case management support. And so it's an easy transition, it's an easy handoff. It could be a day that we're both meeting with a student to provide that support, and they're getting supported on all levels. So they're getting the mental health support. And so we really want to show that there's a huge connection between mental health support and basic needs support, which you all can probably imagine, right? If I don't have access to pay my bills, or if I'm sleeping in a car, or if I'm going days without meals, that impacts my mental health. It would impact anyone's mental health. And so it's kind of hard to provide that mental health support without providing that basic needs support simultaneously. And so in doing so, it also helps to reduce the therapist, the counselor burnout, right? We don't have to spend hours and hours providing that basic need support and trying to focus on the social emotional, the mental health support. Again, I don't know if any clinicians are on here, but that can be draining. And then that's how we lose clinicians. That's how we're not able to sustain a working wellness center with just focusing on this one thing. So in that, we're also able to increase our support to students, right? Because now I can give more as a clinician. Our counselor can give more as a clinician, because we know that we have Jovan and our interns to provide that support on that case management level. And we know that we have a trusted person that we can hand them off to as well. Again, enhancing that community of care, because if we're sending them off into the to different community resources, who may, like, one resource may work on this thing and one resource may work on this thing. Now they're trying to navigate working through 6 different resources and be a college student and be a parent and be a child taking care of their parent and working full time. It's a lot for them to navigate. So we reduce that burden for them by having this community of care even within our wellness center, which then extends out to other parts of the campus. And I think the folks from Olive-Harvey who are on this call can speak to the work that we've done about shifting our even the perspective of wellness work, because of mental health and even the stigma with our 70% Black students, and thinking about how mental health is stigmatized even within the BIPOC community. And so by creating this community of care, we're able to even reduce the stigma related to help seeking behavior overall, so for mental health and for basic needs support.
But yeah, so I think part of just sort of the overall message that we want to drive home, right, is that the basic needs support and the mental health support are really inseparable. And so as folks are making efforts to sort of bolster the way that they're supporting students with their basic needs, they should keep the mental health aspect in mind, right? And be actively sort of forming collaborative, supportive relationships with other folks on campus, as well as other folks in your community, so that you can sort of start to sort of develop this network of support, a network of care, a sense of belonging, a sense of responsibility amongst all of the individuals that results in this community level change, right? And I think with that, that is all that we had. So we're excited to hear if folks have any thoughts, feedback, or questions.
Yeah, we timed it perfectly to be the 30 minutes we were given. So we're open to any questions, thoughts, feedback.
I think one of the things that I've heard consistently in most of the sessions that relate to holistic approach is having a main hub where these resources are. I'm finding that we're all doing the work, but it's so siloed that we've divided it out that is not as impactful if it was all housed under one roof. For me, I'm with Malcolm X College and we have a wellness center. And I was like, oh, they have their bus cards in the wellness center. That makes sense. Ours is not. It's in a totally different area and you know, students have to go somewhere else for other resources. So they're going to 2 to 3 areas when we tell them, hey, the heart of our building is where kind of those student resources are. So just even looking at practical structuring of the things. But I did have a question about your food. And Jovan mentioned that, and I hope I'm saying your name correctly, mentioned that the faculty were able to access it. Do you guys not have stipulations over who can access your pantry?
No, so we open our pantry to the entire Olive-Harvey College community, and even if we, because I'm sure you know, you're at Malcolm X, we have, which y'all have more events there, but when we're having, like the voting or community-based events, we even offer it to the community when they're there on campus, only when they're on campus. It's not like publicized as open. But for faculty and staff, what we do, we're open Monday through Thursday, and we also have extended hours on Thursdays for evening students, and it is still staffed by student workers. And so what we do is Monday through Wednesday is student specific days, and then Thursdays are the faculty and staff day. So we do want to have access, create that space where students can have that first access to the pantry and the items that's available. And then on Thursdays, faculty and staff have access.
Yeah, I've been trying to gently nudge for our childcare center participants to be able to participate in our fresh market, considering the guidelines for parents to enroll their children in our childcare, just, you know, an overlap of being able to help support.
Yeah, our childcare, which is actually right across the hall from our wellness center, so we have a greater level of contact with them. But I also open it to parents because I consider them a part of the Olive-Harvey community. And like you said, the stipulations to be enrolled, it helps, and so the parents do have access to the external resources that we offer.
And can I add just a couple of things to just again to bring it back to the community care bit with regard to the pantry. Part of what we've tried to do, right, is really help establish a sense of understanding amongst the faculty and staff about why we have the policy that we do about Thursday being faculty and staff day, right? So that they can themselves kind of understand why, right? But see that part of their responsibility is ensuring that students have access to that pantry first, and then that, you know, other folks, the faculty and staff, can come in and take advantage of it as well without judgment and things like that, right? But that's a sense of care that extends from the faculty and staff to the students, right? Allowing and supporting that policy so that we can ensure that students' needs are really being met, as well as faculty and staff. And I also want to go back to the question or the statement you had made about the CTA cards. I think you're right, when we're thinking practically, it's helpful to have it in one place so that folks know exactly where they need to go. They're not thinking, I need a bus card. I don't know if I should go to this office or that office. I've heard folks have gotten stuff from both places, you know. It's just easier practically to have one central place, right? But the community care comes in when folks are able to say, oh, you know, I'm hearing that you need a CTA card. Let me walk with you over to the wellness center because they've got some cards over there. Let's go together and we can ask for it. They're really great over there, right? Or what, you know, however they want to give that little speech, you know, but that's part of it is so that folks who work on campus also know where the resources are and that they're willing to themselves support students through that process. Not expecting everyone to be a mental health professional, right? But have enough of a sense of care and responsibility to students that we're willing to accompany them to the best of our ability. Right? So.
Yeah, I do want to jump in too. I think Dean Ward, you made me think of something else. Like we're providing resources, but how are the students experiencing them, right? And so maybe what institutions need to think about is like doing some process mapping, and maybe we can just make a tweak here or there, to make a little bit of difference in how students experience, getting to the resources. And that was going to be one of my questions to you, LaTia and Jovan, is what are the ways in which you are teaching and training faculty and staff to be those referral agents as well?
That is a great question, Paula. I think I will add that it's something that we're ever growing in. So we do take advantage of Faculty Development Week, classroom presentations, sending out communications to all of our resources. So with this, like I think Jovan mentioned that we have All Chicago. Anybody who's had All Chicago know that their processes have been changing. And so part of what we do is keeping updated communication. So I'll send out emails to say, hey, this is the new process. If you are noticing a student with this kind of need. So emails, I like to be in people's faces, one, so they know me and see who we are. I think that's something we can say about our entire team. Students know us, faculty know us, staff know us, so that it's easier to have a face to hand the student off to. So we use multiple methods. Email is our main one, but also we do the face-to-face, informal conversations, meetings, trying to attend all of the events, trying to attend even classrooms. We're really big on classroom visits to let students and also staff know these are the resources that we have available.
Mhm. And one thing that I'll add to that too is we try to put as much effort as we can into also just building interpersonal relationships with other folks on campus. So even if somebody doesn't know all of the resources that we provide, or they didn't necessarily know that we were free and confidential or something like that, right? They still feel comfortable themselves coming into the Wellness Center, but they also feel confident bringing students and peers and colleagues into the Wellness Center. Something that Tia just has like a natural gift for is remembering people's names. Like I just am not sure how she does it so well. Right, but just like building that sort of relationship with other individuals on campus that, like Tia had mentioned earlier, extends to this sense of community or this sense of belonging on a community level, right? Because folks know who we are and we know who they are as well.
Yeah, and I'll even add to that, like Jovan talked about earlier, even our flyers, being intentional about accessibility with our flyers. And we post a lot of flyers. The Wellness Center probably has the most flyers up, but that flyer, that access, we post flyers in our pantry because we know it's a trafficked area so that students can have access to that. And because faculty and staff also utilize these things, they have access to them as well.
Mhm.
We're happy to open it up to any other questions if anyone has any. I would love it if you would maybe share your job description for Jovan too. And the in Huva, or if you send it to us, we can attach it, in the stuff that we send out, because I think it is a leading practice. I remember working on a college campus, not so long ago, pre-pandemic, when, people would say, well, we're not social workers. Well, we do need social workers today. The data is starting to show us that. And I think we learned from ECMC too, that this is just all evolving thinking in the field. So I applaud you in creating that position.
Thank you, Paula. And funny enough, our entire Wellness Center are all social workers. So this proof in the pudding. Any other questions? Thank you.
Folks, I'm curious, I had a question. Like you mentioned, and I appreciate this has come up throughout the course of the Institute, that this idea of how do we pay attention to students, in addition, how do we pay attention to the needs of staff and faculty? Just curious how you both, if you have a couple of tips on how you maintain and sustain your ability to show up, for your students, and because we know many folks continue to leave the profession for a variety of reasons. And so just curious if you could share with the audience what keeps you going.
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. Well, I think the framework or the mindset or the attitude has a big part of that, right? Is if you feel that you are part of a community, then it's a lot easier to do things for that community, right? Because not only are the other individuals benefiting, but you benefit as well because you're part of a healthy community. And so kind of thinking about the way that you engage with your colleagues and with students and the surrounding area, right? As thinking about it really is, how can I belong to this community? How do I belong to this community? How is this part of, or maybe not part of, my responsibility to my community? That really makes some of the hard work a little bit easier, just on a sort of cognitive level or an emotional level. But one of the big things that we do in the Wellness Center and that we try and do with other folks on campus too is like we let each other know what sort of some of our emotional needs are, what we do, some of our coping strategies for anxiety and stress, whether like I really love, I'm big into aromatherapy, so I love having the essential oils. Or spending some time alone, white noise, things like that. So part of what we do is allow each other the space to do that, right? So if I know Tia really enjoys closing her office door for 30 minutes of silence, then when she closes her door for 30 minutes of silence, I'm not going to question it. I'm going to actually let her know that I appreciate that she's doing that for herself. We have another coworker who likes to hula hoop and is really big into taking a movement break. So when she's hula hooping in the office, I'm not going to make, I'm going to actively not make her feel awkward or uncomfortable because she does that, right? And in return, she makes me not feel awkward or uncomfortable for the things that I do, right? So I'll add that part and then pass it over to Tia.
Thank you. My first initial response is I'm a millennial manager. And so I think for that is allowing all of us like that grace to take care of ourselves. We understand that this work is tasking. It's a lot, and one, we all care about it. So even the preventative stuff, right, is being very intentional about who I even hire to bring into this space, because I know that they're supporting students with high needs. And the movement breaks are something that so I have a little stepper in my office, and sometimes it even encourages everyone else to take a movement break, because we are sitting at computers all day, or we're sitting on couches all day, staring at computers all day. So even Jovan will disappear and someone's like, oh, they're on their walk. Oh, great. I'm so glad that they're taking that time. And even the way our center is set up, we don't get a lot of sunlight. Actually, we get zero sunlight. I jokingly say we're the dungeon over here. And so even taking time to step outside of the center so that we can experience that sunlight. So because we know sunlight helps us and improves our mood. So just allowing space and grace and being very big on this relationship building, relational work, because I know that feels people. Connection is healing. It makes it easier to do our work when we feel connected to the work and to the people that are doing the work. I hope that answered your question.
It did. Yeah, it truly did. Because I think that's always something that we at the PCC are trying to be mindful of. I mean, we are here certainly for the students and the outcomes. We want to see that systemic change show up and be reflected. But as you all know, we can't transform the communities that we're a part of without thinking about all the stakeholders, and staff play such a huge role in faculty, the employees. So thank you for just sharing some of those concrete examples. And when you mentioned, Jovan, movement breaks, I've got a 5-year-old, 9-year-old, and I just think about bringing it back to basics, like what worked, for the little ones, and it's applicable to our grown-ups, so I totally appreciate all of that.
So I know, Joe and I are just we're got a slide we're gonna pop up here too that has a QR code for you to complete our evaluation, which we'll also send out to you via email too. But I just want to reflect a little bit on today. And I do want to thank you, LaTia and Jovan, for closing us out with this session. There aren't any wrong answers in providing support to students in these kinds of situations. I think we learned at the very beginning, Dr. Mercado from PCC pointed out that in the state of Illinois, according to the scorecard, 33% of our students are receiving Pell. That's pretty, glaring in terms of right there, in terms of what students are bringing to the experience and why we need to continue to take that data and then to break it down to see, where the racial and gender gaps are. I don't think any of us have really cracked sort of around student parents and the different needs of student parents. And then this notion of caregivers too, and how that's another stressor on students and their ability to show up. In listening through the 1 million degree presentation, I think Dr. Papa said it takes a village. I think that this last presentation that we've all sat through proves that it takes a village and how important to think through that holistic support model in terms of the way that we're providing supports to students. I think that one of the things that if any of you attended the Chicago State presentation, they have a sophomore academy now too, where they're supporting students in that sophomore year in additional resources and building things too around career sports and mentoring and paid internships. So I thought that was really cool too. What can we say about Dr. Sarah Goldrick-Robb, right? One thing that stuck with me that she said, though, that housing is a leading cause of student debt. So I guess we need to think about that and that we need to think about how flexible we can be when we do have emergency aid programs, that we cut through the bureaucracy and get it to students as quickly as we can. I think the other thing that stuck with me that she said is that we really need to, and I think that LaTia and Jovan have hit on this too with this sort of community notion, is that we have to go into this listening and learning mode. We have to learn from our community. And especially, that student voice as we go forward. I love it that you are bringing more students into your committee work and that you're seeing students as active participants in the work. The student voice is so important. And with that, I will turn it over to my colleague, Joe, for his thoughts.
Yeah, thank you, Paula. Just some takeaways in some of the presentations. I know we were kind of split in terms of the PCC team. I had a chance to listen to colleagues at Elgin Community College speak to what they are doing in terms of reducing or eliminating the cost of textbooks, right? The open education resources and that initiative. And I think what was powerful in hearing them say, not only was this the result of task force and committee work, as many on the call are familiar with, but it was also hearing their colleagues say, hey, we've taken the best lessons learned through this work and looking at the data to support that these initiatives are working. And it's now incumbent upon the institution to formally operationalize the work. So it's moving from task force committee work into now formalizing it as part of the institution's day-to-day work. So I think that's important if we're thinking about making transformative change happen over time. The other takeaway in hearing from our colleagues at Morgan College speak to their partnership with Apple and sourcing Apple laptops for their students. And this was looking at how they were able to utilize her funds. The recurring challenge continues to be funding, right? A shortage of funding, a lack of funding. But what stood out for me was the ability for them to showcase that the students who received these free laptops essentially fared better in terms of their retention rates as compared to students who were not participating and did not receive an actual laptop from the institution. So again, I think any time that our colleagues and partners are able to demonstrate the effectiveness of their efforts and linking it back to how we can source more funding to support that work, the better off we'll be as a state, as a nation. And then to your point, Paula, I think the collaboration is key, right? I think this is what we heard from just now. LaTia and Jovan speak to how they're able to really ensure all students are being served well. At Olive-Harvey is the idea that that each student is everyone's student, and I think prioritizing it through a mindset and culture of care is what it takes to adequately support students. So thank you. I do want to highlight just some, reminders, following this institute, but something that our executive director, Lisa Castillo-Richmond, has often said in the past, right, Paula, is that this idea that equity is a team sport, and there is no I in team. And so we look to many of you who are part of the ILEA initiative. We have 25 community colleges and four-year institutions who are part of this, who have been part of the initiative since 2018. Hard to believe that we're approaching the final year of that initiative in 2025. We continue to hear the importance of addressing student needs through the cultivation of a campus environment that supports care, one that respects, where students are and all the needs that they're coming to our institutions with, and how it is that we can create those conditions for them to succeed. That's the goal here. Our North Star continues to be their success, the success of all students who choose to come to our colleges and universities. We hope, though, Paula and I, and on behalf of the partnership staff, we really hope that you're able to take, some of the wisdom and knowledge that was shared here today and really continue to apply that into your day-to-day work. We hope that if you had an opportunity to network or meet someone via the Whova app or through email, please do what you can to follow up after today is over, so that you never know what can transpire in terms of further external partnerships. Paula mentioned a survey, and again, we can't continue to provide relevant convenings and content for you unless we hear from you. So with that being said, we hope that you're able to scan the QR code here on the screen, complete your survey. It doesn't take that long. Feel free. Some of you have done this in the past, and we welcome individual emails. Paula, myself, we're your coaches. Mercedes is also a coach to our ILEA partners. Please let us know how we can do, what we can do to better support your respective efforts. We want to hear from you. Anything else, Paula?
No, I think that, one of the other things that stuck with me, and I know we had some college presidents with us here today, is that Ayeri from ECMC also said that leadership has to champion basic needs and understand data around student needs. So any time that you can get the data that you collect, the stories that you collect in front of your leadership is really important to this work too. And I think she also hit on that language matters, that even the data we're collecting is so underreported. So I know LaTia and Jovan and Joe and I talked at the beginning of this presentation about how, well, maybe there is a way for us to engage the student voice in that too, and how we collect data around basic needs. And how we might even be stigmatizing it ourselves in just the way that we ask. So there's a lot that we don't know. There's a lot that we've learned, and there's a lot that we have to continue to learn around this. I just want to thank everyone for joining us in this space today and to continuing to do the work that you do in serving students. And as Joe mentioned, I hope you take the time to share your thoughts with us.
Yep. And one final reminder about the Institute, we are going to be following up most likely in the next 2 weeks. We do need some time to make sure if there's any edits to the recordings that need made, we'll do that. But please refer to the Whova site. There's just a wealth of resources, articles that people have been uploading, and we appreciate you for doing that. Continue to keep in touch with each other, but certainly with the PCC staff. We are excited. We are quickly approaching the end of another academic year, so we keep that in mind. We wish you all well as you wrap up the semester or the quarters, the grading that has to get done, the supports that have to be provided. And we thank you again from all of us at PCC. Have a great day.
Thank you.